Hello, and I'm here in Covington, Washington, where I grew up and spent most of my life. I'm going to be talking about a very deep subject, especially for me, because I didn't feel comfortable talking about this until I was about 28 to 29, because I was afraid that other people were going to treat me differently. I'm going to take you along that journey of how it impacted my schooling and just my social life altogether, and still how it impacts me to this day. But we're going to go on an adventure. Now we're going to start off where it all first started, right here at Jenkins Creek Elementary School. This is where the teachers kind of noticed that I was not picking up the knowledge that they were trying to give me. Math, reading, writing, pretty much everything that an elementary school student would have been picking up at that time. From kindergarten to the first couple of years, almost to like the first and second grade, that's where I could easily copy the notebooks that they gave you, where it had the ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, and just do some of the generic things. But when it got past third and fourth grade, that's where I struggled quite a lot more, because I could not keep up with the rest of the class. They weren't really sure exactly what I had, so they decided to put me through a couple different tests where I had to do some math, reading, writing, and I still was struggling with it. That's when they discovered that I have dyslexia, but they weren't sure exactly how bad it was at that time. So they decided to stick me in a classroom that's more for people that are having challenges with schoolwork and trying to keep up with the rest of the class. When I was in that classroom, it was a lot more difficult because I still was not catching on, and I was seeing everybody else being separated, and that's when you get treated so much more differently than the rest of the class. A lot of my friends were in the same exact classroom. All the other kids did see that we were going to this special class, didn't really understand exactly why, so they started to treat us a lot different, where they didn't want to hang out with us, didn't want to talk to us. I had one friend that was in the normal class, as they considered it back in the day. She was part of the popular crowd, and I really thought that we were close friends. Come to find out, she was making fun of me behind my back and just talking about me constantly to all of her friends, saying that we weren't really even friends. So that devastated me, especially after I left the school and found it out later on, because she just disconnected from me altogether. Luckily at this time, my mom noticed that something was not right, so she decided to talk to some of the teachers, and she actually sat down with them and said, hey, he needs extra learning or extra assistance. In that special class, I actually sat down every day, almost after school or on breaks, just depending whenever there was time, and started practicing my ABCs, 1, 2, 3s, anything that I was having difficulty with. I did have the basics down, but I couldn't do my B's or D's. I was always putting them backwards, and I could not read absolutely anything. I could just read in, the, just small little words. Anything past that, it was so difficult for me. As I was getting closer to 6th grade, my mom noticed that I needed more help, just because it still was hard for me. I did get a little more down, getting my B's and D's corrected, but it still wasn't as easy as other people normally would have it. So she decided to enroll me with a tutor. That's going to be our next destination, and I'm going to go more in depth as I was finishing up 6th grade and going to a different school that was more suitable to what I actually needed and more assistance, especially with all the teachers. I came right here to get extra tutoring from East Hill Friends Church. My mom and dad found a tutor that actually specialized in dyslexia, ADD, and just anybody that had a learning disability, so that way they could give you extra attention, so that way we could work on it and try to make it better. This wasn't the main office for the tutorer. She did have an office over in Tacoma, if I remember correctly. Now, I don't have the best memory when it comes to names, so otherwise I would thank each and every one of them, because they helped me so much throughout my life. My mom and dad especially, and my grandmother and my great-grandmother, because they helped pay for this tutor that I really desperately needed when I was younger. To get me to go to the tutor, my mom did bribe me. She took me to a local shop, or a shop that doesn't exist here anymore, that had a whole bunch of trading cards, sports memorabilia, but Pokemon was the hugest thing, especially during that time. So once in a while I was coming here, we'd stop there, get a card, and then we'd stop for Starbucks, because the tutor noticed that I paid a lot more attention when I had caffeine in my system. I went to this tutor for quite some time, a couple of years, working on my reading, my writing, just trying to get it up to where everybody else was. Now, of course, that was a long way away, but each teacher and tutor gave me nothing but patience and understanding. I was supposed to go to a middle school that was closer to Jenkins Creek Elementary and a high school that wasn't that far away, but my mom, my dad, my family decided that they were not able to assist me with my dyslexia. So we're gonna head over to the school that I went to at the same time that I went to this tutor. Walking along this busy road right here in Renton that connects Covington, Maple Valley, if you keep driving all the way up into it, the school is right off of this road. And here we are at New Horizons School. This is where I came after 6th grade to get more assistance and have teachers. The classrooms were a lot smaller, only about 5 to 10 kids in each classroom. When I was going to the school district determined that they could not provide the service that I needed. So they actually paid for this school so my parents did not have to pay for it. So that helped out quite a lot because the tuition just for this private school was outrageous. A lot of people had to decide if they were going to sell a whole bunch of different things just so then they could pay for their child to come here. A lot of kids ended up actually leaving the school because they decided they did not want their parents to have to do that for them. The school did offer classes all the way from 1st grade to 12th, all the way up to graduation. We did have homerooms that only had maybe about 5 to 10 kids in each homeroom. The whole school altogether only had about 148, if I can remember correctly. The great thing about all these classrooms being so small is the more attention that you actually got. So you got more assistance so that way they could work on what you needed to work on. And there's so many stories I could tell you about these teachers because I went through some interesting times where teachers got a little more aggressive, especially back in the 90s and early 2000s. That wasn't really acceptable, but a lot of people were scared to report it, especially kids. I remember going to a yearbook class, and this is where we sat on computers and actually practiced typing because that was one of the courses that was offered here. I remember sitting there with my friend at that time, Aaron, and we would just take naps or just joke around and do absolutely nothing. Less to say, there was no yearbook that year. During my time here, the public school did visit me once a year just to give me test evaluation, just to make sure that this school was helping me. They determined that it was helping me and it was getting my grade level up. After the 8th or 9th grade, my mom did sit me down and say, "Do you want to go to the tutor anymore?" I decided not to, even though it was helping me tremendously. I should have kept going to it, but I wanted to start having a social life and I didn't want to feel too different from everybody else that was going to that same school. One of my fondest memories, going to this school, going to the tutor, and going through this whole process of the dyslexia was learning to read. When I learned to read, I actually read to my great-grandmother. She was a huge inspiration to me, and it meant so much that I got to read my first book to her. I did end up going to college. I went to Highline Community College in Federal Way. I only went there for about a year because I determined that college was not for me, especially when school was already so hard. And of course, keeping up with some of the classes and courses, I had to take a tape recorder with me just to understand some of the notes that I could actually retain. Now that brings me to present day. It's still a struggle at some times. I will be at work and I will be typing a long note or filling out a report. And a lot of people will question, why are you saying it this way? Or why are you spelling it incorrectly? They don't understand until I actually explain it to them. Now, like I said, I did not feel comfortable explaining it to anybody until I was about 28 to 29. So it's only been a couple of years since I've actually been comfortable talking to anybody about it, especially to share it with anybody, because I was kind of embarrassed about my dyslexia. After explaining it, a lot of people understand and go, okay, I can see why, and it's completely okay. And they try to help me, but half the time I don't want any help. I try to put it in Word, I try to put it on spelling programs, so that way I can try to work on it myself, because I am really determined. Now, of course, I should take some help sometimes, but it's hard, because you really want to be independent. When it comes to reading, I still have difficulties reading really big words. I do have to break it down and actually sound it out. After I do it 2 to 3 times, I normally get it. There's only a few times that I get frustrated and then I just stop completely. But then I come right back and try one more time, and eventually I'll get it. So it's gotten so much better. for anyone that does have dyslexia or a learning disability that they need some extra assistance, don't be afraid to ask. I know that sometimes it's scary or embarrassing, because that's the hugest thing, but don't be afraid. Keep going after everything that you want to try to achieve, and don't ever stop. I want to thank everybody for coming along this journey with me and letting me share my story about my learning disability and how it impacts me to this actual day. Now, if you did like this type of video, make sure you subscribe to the channel. Hit that like button and hit the notification button so you get notified every time I come out with a future video. Thank you so much. I hope everybody has an amazing day.